Hi everyone, I'm really excited to share with you a story that recently came out in the spring 2012 issue of Picayune Literary Magazine. I wanted to read it for you so you could have the experience of hearing it and seeing parts of it. So I've put together a little video, but I don't want any of the images to guide how you might imagine the story in your own head. So feel free to close your eyes and just listen. Instead of looking at the images, but they're there for you if you'd like to see them. So this story is called Waiting for Mitchell. The screen door was thwapping against the frame while I sat in the kitchen painting my nails, burgundy with flecks of gold. Mitch told me it was sexy, and the color matched the new skirt I had got from the consignment shop in town, so it was perfect. He hadn't been home in 2 weeks since he was out on the truck driving gallons of milk from Illinois to Kentucky to Atlanta. He was coming home tonight after a stop at Kinley's to have a beer with the guys. I waited for my nails to dry, blowing on them and shaking them in the air as the raindrops began to patter against the roof. I hoped it wouldn't rain so hard that the leak in the kitchen would flare up. When the color was set, I went upstairs to make sure everything was in order. I'd done laundry yesterday and folded Mitch's clothes the way he liked, stacked neatly in his drawers. Underwear and socks in the top, t-shirts and long sleeves in the middle, pants and shorts in the bottom. I'd put his favorite sweatshirt and a pair of shorts on the bed for him to change into when he got home. I checked the refrigerator and went over the list in my head. The side door was stocked with Blue Ribbon, Mitch's favorite beer, for reasons I didn't know. I didn't touch the stuff. I picked up some hamburger meat. One package was in the freezer, one ready to be thrown on the grill tomorrow. Other stuff he liked, chips, Little Debbie snack cakes, were in the cupboards. The chili was simmering, or whatever it does, in the crock pot on the counter. The scent of the spices made the house feel more homey than it usually did. Cornbread was in the oven, waiting to be warmed up when he pulled in. Peeking out the window, I saw the rain had gotten heavier, coming down in sheets, as they say. But this was like diagonal or sideways sheets. I don't know why they call it that. It doesn't look like sheets to me. I put a bucket under the spot where the leak usually starts up just in case. Then I waited, sitting in the living room, flipping through the pages of People. It was getting late, and he still wasn't home. 30 minutes later, I was tapping my fingers against the table when the phone rang. It was Jimmy from Kinley's. He told me I had to come get Mitch since he couldn't drive me home. I hoped it wasn't bad. I pulled on my green raincoat and matching boots and headed out to the pickup. It roared to life after 3 attempts. I put it in gear and headed down the steep hill into town, my headlights bouncing along the uneven road. In Kinley's, I couldn't see much at first on account of my eyes adjusting to the lighting inside. Then I made out some shapes near the bar and walked toward them. "Rosie," Jimmy said without much emotion. "About time." The bar was mostly closed. Just Jimmy, who was wiping everything down and waiting to go home, and Mitch and his buddy Hank. "Hey, baby," I said to Mitch. I could feel the smile growing on my face. "Hey," he said, and slapped the bar with his open palm. He stood up to leave, and then I realized he wasn't that drunk. But Jimmy was a stickler for people driving safely. "Ready to go?" "Guess so," Mitch said. "Real nice getting kicked out on my first night back." Jimmy waved him off with the towel. "And I'll be seeing you tomorrow all the same." Hank didn't move or get up or say anything on seeing me. He was much worse off than Mitch, his head kind of dangling there like he wasn't able to operate his neck anymore. "You need a ride too?" I asked Jimmy, knowing that Stella was, like me, probably waiting for Hank to get home. But she had 2 kids. She didn't need to pack up the little ones and be out on a night like this. But Jimmy said Stella was already on her way, so I patted Hank on the back as we left, and he moaned. I opened the door for Mitch to get in the passenger seat, and he said, "Isn't this backward?" I smiled and felt shy all of a sudden, like a little girl, and he put his hand on the small of my back, which was a touch that made me feel like we were sharing something. He smiled back at me and walked to the driver's side and pulled open the door and sort of bowed with one hand across his waist. It was cute, and I giggled. He shut the door after me and ran back to the other side and got in, shaking off the raindrops. "I'll fix you some chili at home. Made it with turkey." He leaned back in his seat, shut his eyes, and reached out to put his hand on my thigh, patting it lightly. "I missed you," I said. He nodded. Everything felt just right. In the kitchen, I turned on the oven to warm up the cornbread and stirred the chili. I got out 2 bowls and 2 small plates and cracked open a beer for him. I laid everything out on the counter on placemats and made it look all nice. Maybe he'd even forgotten about dinner and take me upstairs. The rain picked up, drumming against the roof, and I heard tiny drops beat against the bottom of the bucket. Without bringing too much attention to it, I made sure the bucket was right under the drip and put a towel over the top to dull even the faint sound of it. Mitch was upstairs in the bedroom, opening and closing the drawers, probably checking to be sure everything was where it should be. When he came down, he was in the gray sweatshirt and old jeans that were too big and held up by a worn brown belt. I thought he would have wanted the shorts. He sat at the counter and I dished the chili into his bowl. "I made it spicy this time," I said, "like you asked." Something seemed different about him. Like walking through the front door had pulled some kind of switch in his brain. I ran through my head all the things I should have done before he came home, and I was sure I had done them all, and done them correctly. He blew on a spoonful. "Where's the cornbread?" I placed a steaming square on the plate in front of him and waited until he tried it before I moved or even took off my oven mitt. He made a sound that resembled enjoyment, and I knew it was okay, so I turned back to the stove where the pan was sitting and went to cut it into squares. Just then I heard a thump, like something heavy fall into the ground, and by the time I turned to see that it was his chair, Mitch was behind me, his thick hand on the back of my neck. He pushed me down over the stove hard, my face pressing into the metal burner, which wasn't hot but just a bit warm from the oven being on. I yelled out something, not a word, but more like surprise mixed with a word. "I told you to get that roof fixed," he said, digging his fingernails into my neck. When I didn't say something fast enough, he pushed me forward so the edge of the hot cornbread pan was pressing into my cheek. I screamed, "It's burning! Stop! It's burning!" And that's all I could think about, that sizzling feeling on my face. "Mitch, please!" He grabbed a handful of my hair right at the root on the back of my head and lifted me up off the stove so that his mouth was just behind my ear, and he whispered, "What do you say?" "I'm sorry," I said. "And?" "And I should have gotten the roof fixed." "Damn right you should have gotten the roof fixed." He spun me around and pushed me down again, this time bent over the kitchen table. I reached for the edge, for something to hold on to. The salt and pepper shakers rattled against one another. When he finished, I heard him buckle his pants back up and return to the meal he'd left. "I need some water," he said. I stood up and touched the burn on my cheek. It throbbed and pulsed, like my heart was right there underneath the raised skin. I wondered how I'd explain this one. Wondered how Stella would look at me this time. I took a glass out of the cabinet and filled it. "You expect me to drink it warm?" he asked. After we ate, Mitch was in the living room watching ESPN. It was late and nothing much else was on. Not that he'd choose another channel anyway. I put all the dishes away and went to sit on the couch with him. "Are you getting tired?" I asked. "I need a beer," he said, which I knew meant that once I gave him one, I could go to bed and he'd come when he was ready, or he'd fall asleep right where he was on the couch. The towel I'd put over the top of the bucket had become heavy from the water dripping on it and folded in on itself, finding a resting place in the base of the bucket. I wrung it out in the sink and hung it over the edge of the counter. I cracked open a blue ribbon and smelled it. It reminded me faintly of my childhood farm, like fields of corn growing. Then I took a sip, remembering why I didn't like it. It was earthy and bitter. I stared into the can and thought about how Mitch might notice that there was a sip missing if he looked close enough, and then everything would start all over again, and I wouldn't be able to just shower and go to bed and forget the raw feeling between my legs. I turned on the sink to refill the sip I had taken and noticed the bottle of cleaner on the counter. What if I used that instead? So I took a second sip of beer, more like a gulp, and it tasted better with that thought in my head. Unscrewing the cleaner spray top, I smelled the sweet lemony scent and wondered if Mitch would notice it right away, or if I could get away with it, or if I even cared either way. I took another sip. I wasn't sure how much cleaner needed to be in there. There had to be some kind of balance point, some middle line between using too much that it was obvious and too little that it wouldn't even make a difference. I tilted the bottle over the can, the yellow-orange liquid creeping up the spout, and held it there. "Rosie, goddammit!" Mitch yelled from the other room. I held the bottle there, over the can. There was a faint buzzing in the air, the murmur of the television, and the front door still thwapping time against the frame. I counted out the rhythm, then put the cleaner down. With my other hand, I raised the can to my lips and spit into it, the kind that feels like it comes from deep down in the depths of the body. I turned the faucet on low, swirled the spit with the beer and the water, and carried the can to the living room before Mitch could say another damn word. Thanks for listening. I hope you guys enjoyed hearing that story. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them below. I'll definitely answer them. Anything about how I got the idea or how I wrote the story, I'd love to talk about it. So thanks for listening again. Hope to see you guys again soon.